Everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Ted Gutierrez, CEO and co-founder of SecurityGate, the leading OT cybersecurity assessment and improvement SaaS platform provider. Ted, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only to get and understand your background, your experience as an entrepreneur, but also what's super interesting about the cybersecurity space as it continues to evolve. Also, a lot of people are talking about AI, and maybe that causes some friction or complications with companies who are providing security for organizations and such. So I'm so curious on where it's evolving. And I'm sure our audience wants to know, how can we also defend ourselves? And we'll go into all that fun information and talk business as well in terms of how do you scale a cybersecurity startup and what does it mean to build those partnerships and what's the sales cycle and things like that when you build a partnership with the client. Before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started the company?
So before I started the company, and first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Excited. I've watched a lot of your different podcasts and excited to be part of that real big movement of folks on your podcast.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was actually in the critical infrastructure space. I owned a company that was an industrial coatings company, and so we helped oil field, major hydroelectric power plants, manufacturing facilities work on abrasion resistant and chemical corrosion resistant materials. And it was a real full blown chemical company. And it was it was actually a full blown company before I came in as chief operating officer.
Yeah.
Stayed for three and a half years, grew at a couple levels, and then decided that I wanted to get into more of a scalable technology space or SaaS space. And I knew that cybersecurity was just blowing up. And that was back in, I guess we founded the company in 2017, so it would have been around the 2015 frame. Yeah.
It's so fascinating just thinking about your past experience working at a chemical company. I'm always curious, companies that are, say, tech adjacent or use a lot of tech to enable production and a lot of what they do in their operations, what are some of like the ways that those companies can be compromised that people aren't aware of? I think we all think about SaaS providers, think about social media and how we can get our private information hacked, but for me, that's the least of my concern. It's when there's infrastructure or where there's big companies or corporations that hold materials, maybe get hacked or something like that. What are some ways that you've seen companies like that compromise, and what are some ways that they combat that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So before I was actually on my own company and started really on my entrepreneurship journey, or really that was my business ownership journey, I classified the two differently, which I'm sure we could talk about later.
Yeah.
I was actually an auditor for Shell. So I had a really great opportunity to learn from some of the best risk managers in the game. How do you assess a given facility, figure out where its risks are, translate those risks up to engineering so they can make better decisions? At the end of the day, that's kind of where I lived. When I went and ran my chemical company, I got to see just another part of what we call the critical infrastructure space. So CISA, CISA.gov is the government cybersecurity agency for critical infrastructure. And there's 16 different sectors. So what you mentioned falls into really three of those: healthcare, retail, and banking, right?
Yeah.
There have been standards for the better part of almost 20, 25, even some 30 years where privacy, healthcare data, and actual like finance files you can be fined, right? You can be fined by a government agency. And so there have always been a lot of solutions on the market that help you either understand where your risks are, understand where your cyber controls are, and they give you some element of how to fix it, right? Coming from my background in the other 13 sectors, we're talking about energy, we're talking about wastewater, we're talking about chemicals, transportation. These are industries that you're not really worried about privacy files. You're not really worried about financial data. You're worried about kinetic events. You're worried about loss of production time. You're worried about what is called non-productive time. And some of these kinetic events that are potential, that can happen because of a breach in let's just say cyber, to be really simple. The impacts to the business outcome are just different. And so I saw that firsthand when I was at Shell. I saw that firsthand when I was at my chemical company. And so it was right around the 2015, 2016 timeframe. I started looking at where venture capital and private equity money was going into the cyber solution spaces. And I saw that there was a real niche opportunity to help these critical infrastructure companies that have been relatively laggards in the cybersecurity evolution
Hmm.
help them really jumpstart their overall strategy of how they identify where their risks are, and then give
Yeah.
them a roadmap. And so that's why about, well, 7 years ago, I set out to create the perfect cyber assessment. We've been on that journey ever since, man.
I
Um,
love that. I love that. And it's so fascinating thinking about the types of risks that these companies have to combat against, but also what are they doing prior? Are they building their own internal teams? Are they using the best technology? How much of a heavier build is it versus using a solution like SecurityGate?
yeah, look, I mean, the primary use case that we first started with was the primary use case of myself in critical infrastructure assessments. I had an
Hmm.
Excel file, I had a standard. I translated that standard into a number of questions that I put in an Excel file, and I would answer those questions myself while I go to various facilities. I would interview people. You can
Yeah.
apply the exact same methodology to tons of different industries. The real challenge started to arrive when I tried to do that over and over and over again. I tried to make it into a repeatable process. And let's not forget, individuals are great. I'm probably the biggest proponent of a skilled workforce being able to do more than technology,
Yeah.
but it's a subjective process, right? So I think that the banking industries, the healthcare industries, these guys have had to do a lot for what we call compliance and privacy. And
Hmm.
so I think they're leaders in the space. They always have been, right? It's the chemical companies, the midstream pipeline companies. These folks have not been exposed to as many cyber threats for as long, and so
Yeah.
they're coming up. But look, I'll be the first to tell you, I think that with all of the different cyber attacks happening really over the course of the last 5 years, 5 to 7 years in the news, there's been a healthy amount of investment from the private sector to figure out how do we do better. And I'll be the first to tell you, I think we're moving the needle, but I
Yeah.
don't think that we're anywhere close to figuring it out. So I think it's a collective effort from government agencies to private sectors to entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Between the three groups, there's enough data that I think we're going to be busy for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking just for context sake for the audience as well, what are some of the attacks that companies like these would face or are facing more frequently than have been in the past? And I think a lot of us are like, oh, I get an email from my CEO that needs me to do some special task. And then all of a sudden I give them my personal information. Like it being that's quintessential what people think about. But what's
Yeah.
different or what's similar to the attacks that these companies face? And how much are they increasing in the more recent years than in the past?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple scenarios, right? So we all know what a data theft look like or a
Sure.
ransomware looks like. Those are mostly IT or computer based situations. If you're in the upstream drilling world, you have a rig that's out in the middle of an ocean somewhere.
Mhm.
Well, in order to keep that rig operating right where it's supposed to be operating, for lack of a better term, let's say that they have these thrusters at the bottom of that rig. And so
Yeah.
they're using global positioning systems, and they're attached to computers, they're attached to communication devices, they're attached to a host of different controllers, interfaces.
Yeah.
And what if one of those gets compromised? What could you do to to change the business outcome? Okay. That could be non-productive time, which could be $600,000 a day. If you are affected for just 6 to 12 hours, that's a huge loss to the bottom line. That
Yeah.
affects jobs, that affects productions. Let's say that you're in the chemical manufacturing world. If you have 7 different chemicals coming from 7 different types of facilities, and the collective connection between all
Mhm.
those, let's say, inputs create one output, and let's call that a tire.
Yeah.
Your tire production is going to be down if one of those third-party vendors can't get its product to you on time, right? Because
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's like it's like one of the ingredients. And so
Right.
I just gave you two very different examples of different cybersecurity threats can impact how your overall business
Right.
does its business, right? And that's a
Yeah.
lot different than a computer system being attacked or an individual being attacked at a given healthcare company and we lose a bunch of files. I'm not diminishing the importance of the
Sure.
latter. I'm just saying that we have a much bigger challenge on what we call the operational technology
Yeah.
within what we call critical infrastructure sectors. And so one of the things that I've been touting a lot and doing this really based on overall demand is what is the business side of cybersecurity?
Yeah.
And what are the various outcomes we're trying to avoid and achieve, and how does a cybersecurity strategy kind of fit into that? When you start asking that question, Julian,
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity stops becoming a security or IT or OT problem, and it
Yeah.
starts to become a CEO problem, right? And
Yeah.
that's where I spend the majority of my time, is having conversations about
Yeah.
overall long-term strategies around their cybersecurity.
Yeah. And what made you go the top-down approach? Was it just easier to kind of implement the technology, do the rest of the team? A lot of companies have gone the bottom-up approach, making it almost impossible for people to extract the tool, and then obviously goes upstream. But there's pros and cons to each. Why did you choose this? What makes this about
Couple reasons.
cybersecurity change kind of
Yeah,
what you do?
so SecurityGate is a multi-tenant software solution that brings cyber teams and operational leaders together on a single pane of glass. Helps them understand where are my overall trends within 130 facilities globally, and what action plans do I need to take. If you
Yeah.
compare that value statement with a plug-in solution that's at the shop floor,
Mhm.
then your actual users, our actual persona is a little bit different. Now, we need everybody up and down the chain of command. The more people that log in and add value to the SecurityGate platform, the more
Mhm.
visualizations can tell a story. We're in the
Mhm.
business of telling a story, right? And so our persona that we're really reaching are the core decision makers
Mhm.
that are going to really increase the amount of budget allocated to the actual doers and the directors that are managing them.
Yeah.
So that's why our API strategy and our partner strategy has kicked off so much
Yeah.
since really 2021, is because whether it's network solutions, whether it's industrial guardian solutions, or whether it's vulnerability solutions, all these folks see the
Mhm.
value of SecurityGate's output as an opening of the door to say, look, these 16 facilities need something that these other 15 don't. And
Yeah.
so I think it was about really affecting change. And the higher that you can go in an organization with a visualization of where the risks are,
Yeah.
the more alignment you have. The second reason that we kind of chose a top down versus bottoms up approach really has to sit with where we think cyber budgets are going over the course of the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
We feel that there's been this explosion of cyber budgets. As a result, investors have put massive amount of capital into these companies. Some were early to the market, some were right on time, and now I feel that in some specific use cases, there's a bunch of laggards. We combine that with a pretty dismal 2022 for a lot of tech companies. And I
Yeah.
think we have a perfect storm where you're fighting for relevancy, right? And so for us, starting at the top was, we believe that budgets are not going to continue to increase within the critical infrastructure space. I'm
Yeah.
bearish on budgets, which means that if we can help the most, it's by helping these asset owners understand
Mhm.
that you don't have to fix every single control. Let's connect
Mhm.
the cyber controls you should fix with which ones are most valuable to your business outcome.
Mhm.
And then that's how we serve the market the most, is actually helping them become more efficient with their budgets.
Yeah. And how much of, their business outcomes do you already know going in? Obviously, you've been in the industry yourself, or how much of that discovery process and how different are the objectives for different CEOs of all these other industries that you provide the solution for?
Well, our initial volley into the market, when we had fewer resources, we had fewer data points, we were aimed at the folks that were trying to do just a single assessment.
Yeah.
And then we started to, a year or two later, we started to talk to folks. Well, I need to do 130 assessments. Can you scale across my entire organization? Now, as we've learned more about the overall market, we've been able to enhance the conversation from a, let's do a cybersecurity assessment, let's visualize
Mhm.
that. We are actually coming in with more resources saying, hey, what are the real business outcomes? Because assessments are just a component of that. And our
Right.
API
Yeah.
strategy is the next component, right? So I think that's all part of our, it's a land and expand in the market. We also see a ton of non-technical people in the space that
Mhm.
are making decisions, right? So how we feel a responsibility to talk about the business side of cyber, because we're the only ones doing it, right? We feel it's
Yeah.
a true opportunity for us. I've seen it for a couple of years, but it wasn't until 2023 that I decided it was time for us to kind of take that hill.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned land and expand versus break out new territories and just get as many logos as possible. But the land and expand approach from what I've seen really works when you have something that can connect to an already existing technology. Describe that. Is that what you're talking about, the API and kind of that product? And how did that kind of impact or I guess open the gates to start breaking into these organizations? What more were you offering to them? What other piece of value were they able to see, and how well did that strategy kind of continue to build on the value offering that you're seeing? And was it always the same? What came up with that strategy? What are some things that didn't make the list?
Well, I think there's two. I mean, just from an entrepreneurial perspective, land and expand, I think, is an agile way to test the market and then drive scale when you see the results, right? And your best hope is, as an entrepreneur, that you have the wherewithal to see it happening, that you're not distracted, that you've got a really great support from your investors and your team. You got the right team. So yeah, so land and expand, I really see two ways. The first is a licensing expansion. And then I also see, so that's kind of like the number of users.
Mhm.
And then I'll see a land and expand with different feature sets driving a different value. So
Right.
the former, you've got a company that comes and starts using SecurityGate. Maybe they have 50 facilities globally. They start with 5. Once they start seeing the insights from those 5, they make a
Mhm.
business decision that they want to see the other 50. And that can happen in a quarter. It can happen in a year, right? It really depends on the overall strategy that that organization has. We have use cases of both. We have companies that say, no, we want to take a little bit more time, really validate the solution, just spread across all of our facilities. And we have some that have a more agile approach.
Yeah.
That one is generally pretty easy, right? Because you're taking it from a unit of 5 to a unit of 50. I think the more challenging one, because it has so many more different layers of context,
Mhm.
is when you have somebody that's using the platform just to serve one function,
Mhm.
and then they want to add APIs to add a layer of context, or they want to take and move to a separate business unit
Yeah.
that is doing a holistically different approach to their assessment. What that drove for us was not only an API strategy 24 months ago, where we could actually connect Guardian solutions to SecurityGate,
Yeah.
overlay some high level data on top of our data to give a more contextual, rich understanding of where the cyber controls needed to be
Mhm.
changed. But we actually just released this month version 3 of the platform, which has, from what we're being told by our client and prospect base, is the most DIY configurable
Yeah.
assessment solution in the game. And why we did that was because the expansion that we're looking for is business unit to business unit, right?
Yeah.
So OT has the business unit, but moving into physical cyber safety, moving into physical security, moving into safety, moving into IT, moving into third party, they all have the same use case, but they
Yeah.
may have a different approach to it, right? And so those are a little bit different personas. And so you got to be careful when you scale that out, because once the floodgates open for demand, you got to be able to serve it, right? So
Yeah.
we've been very thoughtful about how we scale and where.
Yeah. You're thinking about the amount of collaboration that goes with fighting attacks or just keeping the infrastructure secure. Who are those individuals that are working with the product? Is it everyone in the organization, everyone around security?
No,
Who's being
no,
involved?
I'd say there's about 3 different types of people. You actually have the person who's conducting the assessment,
Yeah.
who's actually asking and answering the questions that get input into the SecurityGate platform. And those, let's call those our users, let's call those OT and IT analysts, let's call those
Sure.
auditors. The next version is consultative, or director or manager,
Yeah.
who is responsible for control closure. Because when you conduct an assessment and you get some sort of a score, maybe it's a visual score, maybe it's a numerical score,
Yeah.
the reason the score would go up or down is based on the controls that you have open,
Yeah.
let's just say, right? Gaps you have. So the manager is the first person to really say, okay, this is the one we're going to focus on first. This one is more priority than this one. And that's kind of your second persona, who's really focused on, what do I do next? Okay. And then you have a third persona, which is what I call really the influencer and the budget holder, who really wants to see not the granular details. They want to see trends, and they want to see, okay, I've got 6 different managers across 6 different regions, managing 40 different assessors at 40 facilities.
Mhm.
What are my global trends? Because I need to set budgets.
Yeah.
And I need some element of a visualization to help me understand where do I want to spend. And that dovetails right into our long-term strategy, which is we don't feel cyber budgets are going to continue to expand. So we have this standardized aggregation method. We feel really good about the UI. That's to serve really the bottom two who are actually inputting information and then
Yeah.
doing something about it. Those are the primary users who are giving us all of our feedback. But the ones that are driving our most strategic inputs are the ones at the top layer who are
Mhm.
trying to make really 3 and 5 year decisions based on the outputs of those visualizations.
Yeah. Obviously, trust is built by good work and all that, good partnerships, consistent outcomes. But what in a way, yeah, I love how you're thinking about in terms of the budgets aren't getting any bigger, potentially, maybe, may not. But to expand within a business to offer other solutions, how do you find where that value is? You can say strategic, and I'm thinking business intelligence, but that's a little bit more extracted. That could be a little bit more global and a little bit more vague. What are some of the outcomes you're driving, and what are ways that you're driving value for these individuals to expand the value of it outside of just the security offering, the testing, and the tools? How do you do that? What do you do?
So about 30% of our clients are in the consultative space. They're actually consultants that are arming themselves with a platform to go serve an asset owner. And 70% are asset owners. We actually see that flipping over time as we bring on more resellers and more partners that they're taking our product to market. We're working with one company right now that is implementing 5 year programs to
Hmm.
digitally transform shop work floors. And they're coming in with 5 year programs to essentially help these monster manufacturing facilities save multiple maintenance cycles.
Yeah.
And so they have special software, they have special capabilities that will help an organization save literally millions of dollars over the course of every year.
Yeah.
And helping them kind of secure that process, that's where they see SecurityGate. So we're helping them save maintenance cycles, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're going to transform the way you do business, then a lot of the different decisions that you make technically about what plugs into what and what the training is of the various people, that has to be viewed through a cyber lens, and we offer
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Another person, they have the most pure ingredients. Their kind of business objective is that they want the most pure food output in the industry.
Sure.
And so they want to make sure that they have the most robust third party suppliers and they have the most robust
Yeah.
systems in place because they don't want any sort of disruption to what they think is this harmonious synchronization of tons of people. And
Yeah.
if one element of their overall connectivity or their functionality of their different facilities changes, then they're going to be looking at themselves as why didn't we fix that? So they're looking at SecurityGate to help drive the front end of that transformation. We
Yeah.
got another company that actually is just trying to increase the output of their manufacturing, just increase the output by 7%. And so we see ourselves as a tie-in to that to make sure that they're making the investments in the right place. So I think, how do we do that? How do we differentiate ourselves? 60% of the people in this company, that's a standard that we have to operate within by charter, by my guidance, they have to come from the industry,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
some different roles that are, it's better to get that marketing person who's been doing that job forever and that may not require maybe a critical infrastructure background, but over 60% do. So
Yeah.
if you're, and I think that that's important for us. That's that is a that's driving the trust to be
Hmm.
able to get at the seat of the table with these folks to help them understand this isn't a cybersecurity assessment solution. This is a business decision accelerator, right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
they're the right personnel that see cyber as a major part of their business strategy, they're obviously a fit for us.
Yeah. Obviously, just to give the audience a little bit more context as well, tell us a little bit about the growth that you've seen recently. What's been exciting about, obviously, you launched a company back, I think you said 2017, 2018. I'm sure a lot of that was MVP building, getting that minimum value product
Right.
and shipping product out. What's been exciting in terms of the growth you've seen up to this point? And you mentioned you launched something recently, but what's in particular exciting about the next phase of growth and the milestones that you're looking to kind of achieve in the next few months?
Yeah, I mean, we started the company in 2017, had our first MVP out in 2018. We actually had a very unique path where we actually got a loan. We were bootstrapped. We got a loan from a bank. We were probably the only startup in Texas that was able to get a loan from a bank. And I'm thankful every day that I was able to get it done because we leveraged a long-term contract that we had on that. So we
Yeah.
really, from the onset, have been extremely bullish about what we're building, right?
Yeah.
To the point where when we maybe wanted to bring on more people, we just decided to grow organically. We kept our staff operating really effectively throughout COVID.
Yeah.
And it really was coming out of COVID, we had our first real snap as we drove into that 150% year over year growth. And we've been on that trajectory a little higher last year, same trajectory for this year.
Yeah.
We had a unique focus where we went after a certain persona, but it really didn't matter their geography, SaaS-based solution, so we can serve somebody on the other side of the world
Yeah.
pretty easily. A lot of late nights as we grew out the team. But we focused on a type of persona that had an element of readiness associated with their profile, right? And so we've been really, all of our product development has been influenced really heavily by people that really want this product to help them do their job better. And then once we started realizing the demand, we started adding one more sector and then another sector. And then we started adding one more feature set and one more feature set. So we've always, a lot of people will have like a geographic rollout. Some people will have like their rollouts are based on the connectivity to other solutions. Our growth path has really been based on an organic demand and a pull from our client base.
Yeah.
And so we know, and this is why we experience such great partnership with our partners. We know which sectors are more accelerated than others. We know which geographies are more accelerated than others because we put more investment into really understanding and listening to the asset owner demand than I think our competitors did.
Yeah. Whether it's internal or external, what are some of the biggest risks that you think the SecurityGate faces today?
Well, just like I mean any other solution in this particular space, I think it's a competitive space. I think that we have to earn every single sale. I think we have to fight for every dollar alongside our users and our partners because they're fighting for more budget too. So I think being recognized as a viable component throughout the life cycle of a given cyber journey is important. That's where we put a lot of focus on. I think that also staying super relevant with APIs is important because if we can make other product companies more valuable, I think that positions us really well. I think we're not immune to where the venture capital markets are going. And so I think that puts a lot of pressure on pricing. I think it puts a lot of pressure on scale. And then you combine that with what I think interest rates have been doing, put a lot of pressure on families.
Yeah.
We are really lucky to maintain just this incredible team here at SecurityGate. We make tons of investment in our team here. I call ourselves a really great team that happens to be a company that happens to build software, right? When we walk in the door, it's got to be about the people here. And finding really great talent in a market where I think investors are chasing their valuation in this space, they're screwing up the equity model of free talent. And so the amount of people that I talk to that say, man, I really don't enjoy my job, but here's where I'm at in compensation. I think that there's a correction coming if it hasn't already gotten here within this space. It's been bubbling for a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
Our long-term vision is to continue to serve this particular market as well as we possibly can, given the resources we've got and the time and where the world is. We come to work every single day with a very, very clear vision of enabling cyber teams to work better together. As we see, we've got a lot of demand from physical security. We've got a lot of demand from safety. We got a lot of demand for the other risk management components within the space of critical infrastructure. So I spend a lot of my time partnering with companies that also focus in those areas. It's far beyond where we are right this moment. So,
yeah. I always like this next section. I call my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions and then we'll see where we get. First question, I always like to open it up with softball. What's particularly hard about your job day to day?
we might edit this out because I just got stumped. There's a lot of stuff that's hard, I guess. I think wanting to grow faster and be in more places, but also having to manage the expectations of where do we want to put resources? There's so many opportunities out there for us. My job is to say no to about 90% of the things that we want to do and stay focused on what we know we're really great at.
Yeah. A lot of founders, at least in my experience, we will say no towards things that necessarily don't add value towards whether it's a customer,
Yeah,
client, a business, things like that.
sure.
What other considerations that you think founders need to make when thinking about growing in certain particular directions? Maybe it's the things that you've made in the past, or maybe lessons that you've learned. But it seems that that's a particular challenging fact for founders. Sometimes almost leads to a company going down when you spread yourself too thin. What are some things or signals that you're looking for out there when you're looking to expand into different markets or add different features? Is it all client based? Is it a little bit intuition? Is it industry knowledge? What in particular helps you identify those signals and then move and grow in the right direction?
Well, I think you gotta, I mean, look, the role of a CEO founder or any founder for that matter, as you grow your company and experience success, the
Hmm.
fundamentals of the company change. Your role changes, where you are adding the most value will change. And I think a lot of founders forget that, or they maybe screw it up. I also think that it's really easy to forget how far you've come. We do these little things called milestone mixers. And we did them a lot more in the past when we would celebrate small stuff. But you don't celebrate the small stuff and take time to do that, you're probably not setting yourself up to celebrate the big stuff. So I think you have to be really milestone oriented in your growth
Hmm.
instead of time oriented. I think that a lot of really people that come to the entrepreneurial space that have never really been in a given industry, maybe they're just young and they just jump right into it. Their concept of how long it may take to get something done is very, very different than somebody who's been in that game forever. Somebody that's coming from like an employee base, or like, let's say they spent 10 to 15 years in a really structured environment, they get to the startup world and they realize time is not going to dictate maybe how much I grow or when I get paid or things like that. They're like, no, it's based on your actual value you add. And when it doesn't add up the way you want, that's tough, right?
Yeah.
So I think as founders, you have to be you have to be really ready to be uncomfortable and know that that's part of the process. And
Yeah.
uncomfortable can be not knowing what your next step is. Uncomfortable can be I have too many data points. And so as the evolution of a founder's kind of success
Hmm.
changes, so too must that founder be willing to change himself or herself, right? And
Yeah.
so I always tell my team, if individuals wake up every morning aiming to be the next best version of themselves, then the collective team around them will do that. And I think that founders
Yeah.
forget that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned something earlier, the difference between a business owner, your growth from business owner to entrepreneur. Describe what you mean by that, because I think I have some predictions, but I'm curious to how you define the two different individuals. And it's like professional players in different jerseys. Like, what are the different philosophies or mindsets from the business owner's perspective to the entrepreneurs that you see, at least in yourself?
Well, so a business owner is generally somebody who I think, without a doubt, has equity in a business and is looking for ways to simply beat out the competition. And so they'll use operational, they may use some elements of innovation, they may just outwit the next person. They may be able to open, let's say, a dry cleaning service. We could be business owners and we can go have 100 of them, and we just simply do something a little bit better or we innovate a little bit more, but the core
Yeah,
business model maybe hasn't changed, right? When you go into entrepreneurship, the difference is there's not a playbook for what you probably should do next. And this is where I have a little bit of angst sometimes with a lot of the different accelerators or startup ecosystems. Love them to death. I'm super supportive of the ecosystem we have here in Houston and in Texas. But there's so many people that will tell you that they know the right next steps when in reality, entrepreneurship is about defining your next
yeah,
steps and being okay with not getting it all right. So as an entrepreneur, I think we actually have to create new value in a new way, and we have to pull all these things together: resources, time, market readiness, team
yeah,
building, management, simple execution, which I think people overlook all the time. Those are the things that have to all combine perfectly to be a great entrepreneur. You'd
yeah,
only need about half of those to succeed as a business owner. You just have to beat the guy to the next left or the right. The other thing, the difference between I think a business owner and entrepreneur, and this is something that I could riff on for a while. Entrepreneurs generally, if they're first or they're early to a market, one of the big hurdles they have is getting the buyer to understand the value of the new
mm,
product because you built it, you designed it. So That's different. I've never seen anything like this. Okay, well, are you going to buy it? That's a very different motion than I have this restaurant, my food's healthier, better, cleaner, and faster. I
Sure.
have this fence building company and I have the most beautiful fences. Those buyers already know some element of how the business works and how they can receive value. Founders of entrepreneurial companies, that's why market readiness is probably the most underlooked thing that I see with other founders. They got a great idea, they're ready to execute, they have so much passion in it, but if the market ain't ready to pay for it,
Yeah.
the market doesn't trust it. Like
Right.
that's what's happening with all this. I know you mentioned AI at the beginning. Like this chat GPT stuff is ridiculous because
Yeah.
there's a lot of VCs getting excited about it. But the truth is, I have one question, just one. Is your underlying persona and the market that they are in ready to receive that? And if the answer is not an astounding absolutely and they're begging
Yeah.
me for it, then you're probably going to be early.
Yeah. I guess, do you think about implementing, or are you currently implementing certain AI tools and solutions? I think that's what a lot of savvy founders are thinking about, the ways that those incorporate productivity outcomes versus
Yeah,
changing
it's
workforces.
yeah, look, it's cotton candy on a hot dog.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, fundamentally, there's a lot of people that want to add ML or AI. This whole chat GPT might be, let's say it's better than previous versions, but it's just an accelerated version and it'll continue to accelerate. Got a lot of
Yeah.
respect for what it can do. Here's the challenge. We work with global enterprises that have some significant challenges and doubts about whether it's safe or whether there are enough controls to implement it. So that's one.
Yeah.
Second, we're in the security realm. And I've done tons of talking with security players about, hey, are you ready to start using products that incorporate this? And if there's anything but a resounding yes, then I think
Yeah.
that's probably a poor solution. I think that there's some really unique ways to incorporate it to try to drive automation, efficiencies, and things like that. I think I would argue that you've got to do so in a really limited sandbox, and you should probably not put all of your eggs in that basket. So if you're a
Yeah.
big enough company where you can have kind of the eighth floor of the Stark building or whatever, and you can just go play with stuff, there might be something that comes out of that R&D that is really valuable. But as far as like adding it to your main capabilities as a company, I think that's challenging. Now, and I do want to state that finding a way to automate the visualization and usage of your own data, that's a little bit different model. I
Mm.
just think that everybody right now, ChatGPT is the big what if right now. And so for that
Yeah.
particular use case, today, May 9th, 23, I'm bearish and we're not implementing it. And that's simply based on direct feedback from our
Yeah.
critical infrastructure security market leaders, those
Yeah.
customers.
Yeah. Switching gears here, I always like to ask founders this next question, because I love how you extract knowledge out of anything that you ingest, whether it's early in your career or now. What books or people have influenced or impacted you the most?
When somebody told me that the best book you're ever going to read is the one you write. I carry around a journal. I try to keep ideas in there. I actually keep,
Yeah.
not to be self-serving, but I usually pick up a book, I'll read it a little bit, and then I'll just walk away. One that I did read in full was actually Atomic Habits, which I thought was
Yeah,
super
that's
cool.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Just got
that
done with
was,
that.
I mean, I don't read tons of books. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. I spent a lot of time trying to read from other thought leaders in the space, but that's one that I felt really good about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the mechanics behind it. I think that's what really got it.
I mean,
Is the implementation of it, right?
hey man, they take a really big challenge of I need to create better habits, and I think they scientifically break it down into little milestones. The same can apply. The reason I like it is because I like to, well, how am I gonna solve that problem? And as entrepreneurs, we like to choose these ridiculously large, complex problems. And the way I do it is if you kind of take time and then you spin it a little bit, you'll see that there's these various hills and there's these valleys. And at every one of those, there's these tiny little milestones. And so if you're trying to get to a really big goal, shut everything else out and focus on one thing for the next 20 minutes. And then when you get done with that one, focus on one other thing. And when
Yeah.
you do that, I think you create a really repetitive winning mindset that
Yeah.
you can accomplish anything
Yeah.
if you do that one at a time.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of maybe it's ADHD, I don't know, but I'm a big fan of that habit stacking. Having one, or
Yeah.
the need to want thing was something that was interesting. It's like something that I need to do. something and tying it to something that I want, and making that a relationship to really breed, productive habits, behaviors, completing tasks, things like that. I think it really just speaks to the founder mentality, as you meant, to be able to productively make incremental
Yeah.
improvements or movements forward.
Well, I think
Um,
that I think that the biggest challenge entrepreneurs have is who you surround yourself by. You have to be extremely careful at various stages in your entrepreneurial growth that you are surrounded by the right people who are going to help you understand the right challenges and help you win them. There are some folks that I've worked with that are so good at that. And then there's others that, are not. And I think that it's the same thing as if you want to create a habit, then reinforce positive activities and push away ones that are maybe you don't want. The exact same thing is applied to the people that you hang around and the influences that you have. Is you want people around you that are going to push you to be better, but at a pace that is aligned with where you're at in your journey. And
yeah.
I see people really, really get blindsided as early entrepreneurs in that realm. There are guys that are, let's say, Series B, Series C investors, and they somehow find themselves with this brand new entrepreneur who's just still learning how to put a pitch deck together. That misalignment will really ruin a founder's view of what fundraising is like
Yeah.
versus a
Yeah.
really, really healthy angel investor who's done this 17 times, puts his arm around the guy and says, look, this is the only thing that you need to worry about is going and getting one demo. And when you
Yeah.
get that one demo, go get another one, and then another one, and another one. And somebody's going to buy your product, and then you're going to do that again. So I could riff on that all day long, but
Yeah.
that's the same thing as habit stacking. Just get the right influences that'll push you enough to be better
Yeah.
just today.
Yeah, I love that. It's the incremental wins. It's the right relationship between be a founder and investor, which a lot of founders are thinking more. And it's becoming more prevalent as VC dollars are shrinking, and the partnerships in terms of setting expectations with a lot of those who are funding you has been so much more prevalent, especially as external factors continue to ebb and flow. Having that cohesive relationship, that trust, has been so instrumental for a lot of success that I've seen on the show from founders and how they speak towards their investors and things like that. And one question I'd like to start implementing is what's something that you find true that others would maybe have a contrarian perspective on? What's something that you believe that others were outside of ChatGPT, of course?
Oh man, you'd have to put me in a bracket. So you're saying what's something that I might disagree with somebody else on?
What's something that you find true that most would disagree with you on?
I think that revenue will trump scale any day of the week, right? Especially in
Yeah.
these market conditions. So I think that you have decisions to make when you get in front of your clients. And those decisions are, do you want that client to maybe fit inside this little box because that box is maybe what you're trying to do? I think that there's a perception that if we don't start scaling right out the gate, we may miss an opportunity. I would actually tell people to slow down a little bit and kind of walk down the hill and pick all the flowers rather than run down and just pick one. I think that especially with the market being kind of how it is, I think right now founders have an opportunity to really listen to the market and adapt. And I think
Mhm.
people get that wrong. And so over 20, 21, 22, we had a lot of investors trying to really push for this perfection of scale. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure every industry wants that. So I would just say that deliver to the customers what they want.
Mhm.
And 99 times out of 100, you're probably going to get through whatever values you think are there. And so we've actually had so much flexibility offered to us by our investments teams, right? Coming all the way up into institutional capital investors, all the way down into to seed, family, and angels. So we haven't really had that challenge, but I think a lot of founders have. I
Coming to
also
the end.
believe
Go ahead.
scaling too fast, I believe is worse than not getting enough sales early.
Yeah.
I also believe that because it can really set expectations
Yeah.
sideways for different investors.
Yeah, I always find that the founders will scale before they find product market fit, which it blows my mind. Like the speed to find product market fit, the whole move fast break stuff. I think it applies to identifying the valuable piece of your service, product, whatever you have,
Yeah.
and then once you identify that, you can kind of grow and expand to different areas there. But I agree. I feel like the worst case scenario is like the clubhouse example where you get a bunch of users, you get all this traffic, and then you're like, how do I monetize? And then where are they now? it's because of that, I think for me, at least, that foundational piece of gatekeeping with referrals and keeping that kind of as the identity of a product or identifying the product market fit before you scale. Ultimately, I agree with what you're saying. And I know we're coming to the end of the episode here, so I do want to make sure we didn't leave anything on the table. Is there anything I didn't ask you, any question I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything we didn't cover that you want to touch base on? Anything that we missed here?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, man, and I enjoyed it.
Of course, Ted, it's been such a pleasure not only learn about your entrepreneurial journey, but also where SecurityGate is going, where it's come from, and the whole conception of the idea, what you started building out first, different strategies you deployed, and what's exciting about the growth and the partnerships you're building, and how you think about the company's value in terms of outside of its initial offerings and where it kind of lands in its relationship to the clients that you're working with. Last little bit is, where can we find you? Give us your LinkedIn's, your Twitters, all your plugs. Where can we be a supporter and a supporter and a fan of Ted and what you're building at SecurityGate?
I appreciate it. LinkedIn is pretty much a social media choice for me. So first name is Ted. You can find us under SecurityGate, all one word. SecurityGate.io is our website. We'd love some feedback. And if anything that we said is interesting, give us a shout, man. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Of course, Ted. Thank you.